But not a lot of trees grow as weeds, but if there are some, it would probably be the willows. Anything you could take a little branch, put it in the ground, and have it grow into a whole tree is likely to get out of hand. I took advantage of that a while ago and tried to build this willow fence. Not a splendid success, but not bad. Just got these cut-offs, put them in the ground, wove them together, and you got a fence. Here's some small aspens that I have growing up as little bonsai trees, and they take pretty well to this container environment as well. So members of the willow family, aspens, cottonwoods, and lots of different kinds of willows are an important plant, especially around wet areas. So let's meet these members of the willow family. They have simple deciduous leaves that are alternate on the stem, and at least in Washington State, they're always either shrubs or trees. Now, there are not a lot of species that we're going to look at, mostly cottonwoods and aspens, which are both in the genus Populus. And then we'll look at a couple of willows, but not try to look at all of them. There's quite a bit to take on. These are probably familiar trees to you. They're those golden rims along lakes and streams, and maybe even more so, the aroma. The aroma to me of their leaves just says, I'm next to water. It's a very familiar smell for those of you that spend much time outdoors, especially around water. In terms of where they fit in the plant kingdom, they're up here in the eudicots, along with roses in the mustard family, things like that. But they do something unusual. They don't have any showy flowers. Instead, they have these really plain looking, very efficient flowers called catkins. Let's look at the family traits. These guys are trees and shrubs, so they're always woody. Their leaves are very simple. They fall off in the fall, turn golden yellow, like we just said. They are arranged alternately on the stem and usually have toothy margins. You may not recognize it immediately, but over here, usually the teeth are pretty small, but they're there. You got to look closely. Back to the flowers. So their flowers are these things called catkins, and they come in male and female varieties. Even more interestingly, these are on separate plants. So they're male shrubs and female shrubs. And the wind carries away the pollen, and hopefully it lands on some of the stigmas on the female flower, and there you go, you got pollination. This results in fruits that are dry, they're follicles, and we'll see some later, and they usually have these tiny, tiny seeds with long tufts of white hairs. And if you're familiar with cottonwood, you know this very well. Almost all these plants are found in moist areas, whether that's a moist hillside or just beside a stream somewhere. So you're pretty sure you have a member of the willow family, but you don't know if it's a willow, cottonwood, or aspen. If it's a willow, good luck. We will look at the Scouler's willow, which is fairly easy to identify. The other ones are mostly based on technical differences that you need a magnifying glass to look at in the catkins or the stipules at the base of the leaves. So those are a little tricky and beyond of what I want to take on in this video. But cottonwoods and aspens are pretty easy to tell apart. Both these pictures here of the bark and of the leaves are of the black cottonwood, and they're easy to tell apart from the aspens. Both are in the genus Populus. If you add in some of the cultivated Populus, like poplar trees, it gets a little more complicated, but we'll just stick to the natives. Black cottonwood, let's take that one on first. Even if you're not familiar with the tree by sight, you probably know it's white cottony fluff that blows everywhere in the summer, just almost littering roadsides and stream sides and everywhere else. It looks like a cotton truck exploded. May even trigger some of your allergies. So that comes a little bit later in the summer, and those carry its seeds. The leaves over here, you can see they're nicely heart-shaped and golden yellow in the fall. In the summer, they're nice glossy green on the top and a little duller green below. And they usually come out on the ends of the branches in these clusters, so a little hard to tell they're alternately arranged. They get pretty stout. They grow fast, and they can get a good 2 feet in diameter. Here you see some growing probably pretty old along this old stream course here, and they'll grow along mixed with willows. Usually willows are the smaller ones in the foreground, and if you see a big tree, then that's probably a cottonwood. So here's a good size one up here. As they get older, their bark is gray and furrowed, like you see over here. Younger, it's usually smoother and kind of yellowish or reddish. And they have these pointed buds that keep their leaves safe over the winter. They don't really mind where they grow as long as they have water. Low elevation, high elevation, they don't care. Next, we have quaking aspen or trembling aspen, even in the species name Tremuloides, it trembles. And it gets that name because over here with the leaves, the leaf stalk or petiole is slightly flattened, so just the slightest breeze will cause them to tremble and shake like crazy, and you can hear them flutter in the breeze. But this is an iconic tree of the American West. It has these dramatic, smooth, white trunks, and usually grows in these clusters because it's clonal. It sends out these suckers from the roots, and then new trees pop up all over the place. So you may have an entire stand that's really just one tree. So that's part of how they spread so well. You can see the catkins here on this middle picture coming out. They usually come out before the leaves. If you're wind pollinated, that's probably a better strategy than waiting until a bunch of leaves get in the way and catch the pollen instead of the other flowers. So that's the strategy of most of those. And then their leaves are fairly round with kind of this pointed tip and fairly easy to recognize as well. I still find it odd that they grow in such dry habitats. I grew up in the Southwest, and so aspens only grew in the mountains, but here in the Northwest, it's cool enough, and these trees like the cold. They will grow in valleys, even in these basalt hillsides like Mount Clement over here. And it seems strange, but you kind of enter coming up this valley, and it's this other world, or at least another ecosystem that you enter, and it's nice and cool and shady and really just lovely. And I assume there's some extra water up here, but I still find it odd that they will grow up on these hillsides just by themselves, not in giant groves. So they're a fairly impressive tree. All right, so the willows. Even for professional botanists, they know that willows are a tough group. But the Scouler willow is actually fairly easy to identify. You'll see it here and there in the forest, unlike most of the willows that like to grow by streams or sometimes in alpine environments. This likes the forest. You'll see that stems, usually lots and lots of them in this tangled mass, arising from the base, usually kind of a grayish color. And then their leaves. They start out a little bit hairy, and then they get this glossy green on top, and they're kind of spoon-shaped or spatula-shaped in a way, whereas most willows are much narrower and they're wider at the base, tapering to a pointed tip. So that makes the Scouler willow kind of stand out. Here we see it in a couple different environments. Here it's by a creek and a sunny opening, and this one probably established there too. They really like openings in the forest, so they really do well after fires or floods or other tree fall type disasters. But here it's grown in a pretty shady environment. Over here we see its shiny leaves and that gray bark sticking out. And here's a little drawing that I'd made of its flowers to remind us that it's a dioecious plant. But there are lots of willow species, and here you see those narrower leaves. Looks a little bit different, and lots of different catkins. And so here's a male catkin. There's another male catkin. You can see the little yellow tips where they have pollen. And those blow off and catch on the female ones, which are not particularly showy. These are a little past where they've caught pollen. They've been pollinated, and then they mature into something like this that opens up and releases lots of little tiny, tiny seeds on their fluff. And they do this in the springtime so that they can establish in the stream banks, like this one over here. So they really need to get planted right away. They can't get buried very deep, and they need to be on bare soil with plenty of water. So as soon as this water recedes from the spring floods and goes back into the stream channel, then these little willow seedlings start to grow up. And when they do, they kind of form these even age stands in a line, and that's, you can tell, where the stream bank used to be. And here, this year's crop is all establishing right along this little gravel bank. And willows just love streams. Here's some at a higher elevation growing right along the stream side. And then there's kind of a different group of willows altogether, the alpine willows. So a lot of what you see here, and this is up around Mount Rainier, you probably recognize it. This understory is a bunch of little alpine willows, and they're their own species up there. They grow very low. They get buried by the snow in the winter, and just wait out the winter there and then pop back up. And they're really abundant in this habitat. Well, that's the willow family: cottonwoods, aspens, willows. I hope that when you go out next time, you can enjoy them and even know them by name. Until next time, happy botanizing.